Raftis.
Hey,
So I am so
Janet.
grateful to be here with you, Irene. For those of you who are tuning in, who may not know who this lovely woman is, this is Irene Lyon. I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a moment, but I want to share that I have worked with Irene as a client. I have worked with her as a colleague. I have connected with her in many different capacities at this point in time. And she is somebody who is in full integrity in her work. She is smart as a whip, educated. She seeks out knowledge. She's curious, and she has an amazing command of healing, and in particular, nervous system health. And so that was why I really wanted to bring her on to talk with you all today, because I have noticed in my personal body and in the body of clients I've worked with who have worked with Irene, such a profound difference in their, not just in the amount of healing that they've been able to do, but in the amount of resiliency that they are capable of, that is working through them as a result of this work. And so, Irene, I would love for you to
Yeah.
share anything else you'd like to share about yourself.
Oh gosh. Well, the other fun thing is you're like our in-house psychic. So, there's been many times where my team and I have been in a meeting and we can't make a decision. Like, I think we should call Janet. So, I mean, I don't have you on speed dial. We'll book a time and all that. So, but no, we're so blessed to have found each other, and the crossover is just so monumental. But no, I got into this work. It was never like, I want to grow up and do this. I got into kind of we would call it the healing world, but from a more traditional point of view in my teenage years, because I was heavy into sport and skiing. I live in Canada, so mountains and all that downhill kind of stuff. And I injured a knee quite badly. I tore a ligament in my left knee, and I got really interested after the surgery around the rehab. Exercises and strengthening and just really paying attention to the body. And I was active as a kid, but I never had to really focus in that way. So that was like, oh, this is interesting. And that was around the time that I was looking to decide, university, what do I do? And so I studied exercise science and how the human system works and all of that. Here in Canada, we call that kinesiology, but it's exercise science for most people. So I did that. And then I proceeded to get injured again and again from my sports. And I had multiple knee surgeries, injuries. And then the one that was like the kicker was a complication from another ACL reconstruction on the same knee that was the first knee.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some past life stuff there. My kneecap, my patella broke in half spontaneously, like it literally split in half. And it is the most painful thing that I've ever experienced in my life. So there's a reason why the mafia will, take out people's kneecaps, because it really does screw you. And so that, long story short, that was a long recovery. I had to get it fixed, obviously. And what happened after that is, even though I came out and was physically good, I rehabilitated the way I knew how, because I was trained to do that with people. I was just in a lot of pain, like physical pain. And even though I looked great, my body was like internally twisted, and I had all these patterns of compensation from, babying the leg and getting overdeveloped on one side. So that led me to something called the Feldenkrais Method. So that was my first entry into more mind body, less traditional therapeutics. And it was my physical therapist actually who said, I don't know what's wrong. Like, you look great, you're strong, that everything is healed, but I can't figure out why you still have all these tension patterns in the system. And so I said, I'll do anything. So I went and worked with this gentleman who was also a physical therapist, but trained in the Feldenkrais Method. So long story short, completely rocked my world. In a 4-week period, everything was back to normal, if not even better than before. I stopped doing all exercises, all stretching. He's like, just focus on this. And I relearned how to move. Like, the way a baby would learn how to move with freedom and all of that. So that was amazing. I then decided I have to learn this because, I'd be a hypocrite not to. So I trained in that methodology, which is an intensive training of about 4 years, about 500 to 800 hours actually.
Wow.
And then got into practice, loved what I was doing, was making a huge impact with people. And then another, block came in front of me, which was I was then seeing people who I couldn't help with this amazing new thing I had just found.
Wow.
Right. So I think this is how anyone, and you included, like you're not practicing today with the stuff that you learned 20 years ago. You're practicing with all the things that you continue to add and find because there's a missing piece. And so the next missing piece, I was working with people and they were coming in eager because they heard that I was the person that helped things when things were totally not helpable, with physio and chiro and massage and acupuncture and really good, physical therapy. But there was like a few people this one summer in 2008 that were so tricky to work with. And I'm like, I'm missing something, right? I would work with them and we would get some more fluid movement, but then they would come back a week later and everything was back to normal. Like they had forgotten what we had done.
Right.
And so that led me to start to question and be curious and like what's missing. And they all had a similar theme, Janet. The theme was that they all had some form of really significant, intense trauma, whether it was really early, terrible abuse, like really bad accident where their bodies were put into massive harm. One woman had come out of had survived a propane explosion, so like burns all over. Ooh, I just got shivers thinking about that again. One man had fallen off of a cliff. He was a ski patroller on the hill, like the mountain. He didn't break any. This is what's interesting. He fell off of a cliff on his back with his backpack on, and he didn't break anything. He was not paralyzed. But a year and a half later, he was still making the rounds through all the physical therapy centers because he was in so much pain. But there was nothing wrong with this, and so what I now know and what you know through the work is he was in a shutdown. His system went into shock and it never came out.
Right.
At the time, I didn't understand that. So I then decided, okay, let's ask questions. And then that led me to the work of Peter Levine, who is the founder of Somatic Experiencing. It led me to my other teachers like Kathy Kane, who worked specifically with the whole system, but really focused on early trauma, like deep nervous system dysregulation at the core organ level, at the visceral level, the fluid level, all of it, nervous system level. And then I went into private practice. So I did, another 10 years of training and started private practice, was super busy. And then I realized that I was spending a lot of time with my one-on-one people. Like I've got a piece of paper here. So like, I was like drawing graphs and this is your nervous system here and trauma got you stuck up here. We need to come down here. And so I was kind of doing like professor teaching, which is what I did at university, but it wasn't, it wasn't fair that they were, paying me $200 an hour for me to sit and draw something that I was repeating over and over again. They still loved it and it was important, but it wasn't time effective. It wasn't money efficient. And so slowly over time, I started to make like PowerPoint presentations. I would record them on my computer. I would give them to people. I would write articles. I would record audio lessons. And some of those original recordings are still part of what my 12-week program is.
Wow, I love that. It's so interesting too. A couple of things that you touched on. First of all, was I found you in part. Well, I found you through a promoted post you did about anger, right? And I was like, well, this woman like gets it. Like there's an emotional component here. And I read your article and I was just like, wow, this is like awesome. And then I watched your healing trauma series, and what really clicked for me personally and professionally was that I experienced so many clients in that freeze response.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was
Right.
exactly. Like I felt like psychically I see it like one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake.
Yeah.
And it was something that was always with people who had experienced trauma, severe
Mhm.
trauma. I was starting to realize that that was still happening in my life. And one of the things that I really love about learning with you is the learning with you. I mean, there's a lot of like physical touch and heal, like
Mhm.
what we think is healing work, right? But so much of the healing that you share does come through information and education. And
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that I heard in your program or that I read was stuff that provided a dramatic change in my body just through having an understanding that I hadn't had before.
Yes, you got it. I mean, this is, I think, the missing link in how we approach healing. Now, of course, if someone has a broken leg,
Mhm.
don't learn how to fix a broken leg by going to medical school. Like, go to the ER, get a good orthopedic surgeon, get the pin put in or whatever.
Right.
So I think I'm also very cautious. I discern like when learning is important for healing versus just go to the healer, right? Go
Right.
to the doctor if you need that surgery.
Mhm.
But because of our, I mean, this is such a big picture, but because of our history of domesticating humans, plants, animals through agriculture, I mean, this is like 10,000 years ago kind of thing.
Yep.
And then, of course, there's all the other things that happened before that that we won't get into, but we get it. Like all the ways that we were stripped of our natural essence
Mhm.
and our goodness and our full DNA potential. Like there's so much that we aren't aware of. And then we have this higher brain, right? The human has this powerhouse of a brain. And because it's so cognitively based, if it doesn't understand the depth, and I teach, I don't just teach the basics. Like you guys in the course learn what I get taught in my trainings.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you the manuals from SE. I've created my own stuff, but you're learning exactly what I would have learned in my trainings. And by getting that, and if a person's obviously curious and interested, when an emotion comes up, when a weird sensation comes up, whatever it might be, there is this knowing that goes, oh, that's that thing that Irene was talking about. I'm not going insane. I'm not having a stroke. Because at one point, when I was actually in my learning in somatic experiencing, I literally, Janet, was sitting at the beach. This is down in Carlsbad in SoCal. And I'm like, I'm feeling these like cooling, it felt like water running down my legs. And I'm like, am I having a stroke? Like, is this a blood clot? Like, I had not felt
Right.
that kind of subtle sensation that was so distinct. And I even remember driving in my rental car down to La Jolla to see the practitioner that I was working with, one of the assistants in the training. And I sat down in her office. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I told her, and she had watched me at the training for 3 years go through it. And she just sat there and she's like, sweetie, you've been in freeze your whole life.
Yeah. Wow.
Like as functional as you are, because I was very accomplished in my world. I had already done a master's degree and had a relationship and all these great friends, and my brain was working. I wasn't, comatose in a bed, not able to talk. I was really functional. She's like, you have been in functional freeze your entire life.
Yeah.
And it was that moment that I realized, and that last year of our training went, oh my God, we're all like this.
Yeah.
Like there might be an odd case in Western society. I haven't met anyone yet, Janet. Like I haven't met anyone whom is not like, I haven't. and I think that's okay, right? That's just, we're all in the same boat. So yeah, the learning is so important, to go back to your question and your observation, because we're more than just a body. Like we're a body, but then we're this very strong cognitive capacity. I don't even call it a mind anymore. It's just it needs to understand how the system is built so that it can heal itself.
Yeah, and I think it's so fascinating because the mind will just barrel on through
Yeah.
anything, right? It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't care what's going on with the nervous system. It's like I need to
Yeah.
keep busy. I need to do all these other things that will override what's happening in the
Yes.
body. And so, just sort of speaking to that, and because
Mhm.
I don't know that I've met anyone either, right? And so because our society is suppressive, we're suppressive of emotions, we're suppressive of trauma. Even as a child, you fall down, you skin your knee, and you start crying, and well-intended mom is like, no, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. You're okay, you're okay, you're okay.
Yeah. And she's frantic, and then you get frantic, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and we were just talking too about, the whole thing of children crying, babies crying, and can you just address that for me? Because I think
yeah,
people that I've worked with anyway, that I've experienced, will say, well, I don't have any trauma,
yeah.
and yet there's this real pervasive trauma that flies under the radar because it's so acceptable in society that we
Hmm.
should rear our babies to be strong individuals.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, to paint a picture, if you were to think about animals in the wild, specifically mammals, right?
Mhm.
If a cub is whining and crying, it's not like the mother isn't, if that little cub finds the mother's, nipple, the mother, granted, of course, the animal is mentally there and safe, she isn't going to swat it off. Like,
Right,
she's going to let it feed when it's hungry.
right.
And if there's a predator coming into the den to grab, cute little baby bear, that mother is not going to consider, should I protect it? Like, it just it just occurs. It almost seems ridiculous to make these very stark examples, but when we think of the human mammal, right? The human animal, because we're mammals as well as human. There's a difference there, but we are mammalian. We still, when we come out, we are 100% dependent on a caregiver.
Yeah,
If we weren't, we would just pop up onto our feet and know how to cook a piece of toast, or make a piece of whatever. Like, it doesn't work that way.
yeah.
And so, just today, I was walking, we were talking before we started recording, and I was doing my little movement routine out in the sun. And there was a mother with, I think, maybe grandma, and they were strolling a little infant along. And I knew it was an infant because I passed them on the trail prior. And the baby was just wailing. And I could hear it. And even though I'm not that mother to that child, like, my own maternal instinct, and I haven't had my own biological kids, it wanted to go and grab that
Yeah.
baby and like soothe it, because it wasn't being, and you could just hear the cries getting more terrifying and more fear, and they were ignoring it the whole walkway.
Right.
And so what happens in those instances is the little one realizes no one's coming to get me,
Yeah.
and they are in an activation. They're needing something, whether they're too hot, too cold, gas, diaper. Where are you? I can't see you, because a lot of those prams have like the thing versus the ones that are old school where the baby can see you.
Right.
Those, the old fashioned ones where they lay down and you
Yeah, and
push,
they face. They
you
actually
can see
face
the
down and
face.
the baby faces out.
Whereas these other ones where they're strollers and the baby's looking ahead
Hmm.
or laying back, but they can't see the caregiver. And so there's so many reasons why they would start to cry.
Yeah.
If we don't connect in that moment, that little one is going to be like, okay, no one's around. I better cry a little bit more. I better cry a little bit more. But then if no one's there, I'm just going to shut down.
Yeah.
So there's this misunderstanding that when the little one stops, that means that they've soothed themselves. But at that age,
Mhm.
there isn't that sophistication yet in the nervous system, and that is the autonomic nervous system. It doesn't know how to do it yet. And so slowly over time, if that's happening in that simple walk, it's probably happening at home, it's happening all the time. That little one, that little human starts to realize no one's there for me. I got to do it all by myself, literally.
Yeah.
And how many people know that they are so afraid of asking for help, of showing fault, of, pushing on not showing the tears. As soon as the tears comes up, stopping them, whether it's at a movie theater or just in your own home when you start to feel a little sad. I mean, it's so programmed into us. So that's one example of how we as human mammals stop feeling ourselves, is there wasn't an adult there that taught us how to feel that discomfort in connection, so then we could come down in a natural, healthy, co-regulated way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Something that I've noticed in my sessions too is that I often, in the adrenal glands, when I'm working on the adrenals, I will
Mhm.
connect into powerful emotions that are frozen there, literally
Oh
frozen.
yeah,
uh, Anger, grief, deep sorrow, like, and
yeah,
they're, the adrenal glands are just holding them.
yeah. It's like it's this, yeah, because the adrenals are what pump out when that little one is wailing.
Mhm.
It's adrenaline. If no one gets there in a few seconds, it then becomes cortisol,
Mm.
right? And it's like it's like the system is like mayday, mayday, alert, alert. And so, yes, those adrenals and all of the tissues, because it doesn't just live there, it pumps it out to all the tissues. It lives and gets to know terror is just, that's normal,
Right. Wow. Wow. That's
right?
profound. And that is like definitely something that we need to be educating about, right? Is because
Mhm.
and so many of these the parents are well intentioned.
Yeah,
This is the stuff the doctors are saying, like your baby cried out, your baby needs to learn to self-regulate, and so you know as humans we're just like, oh, this is what the doctor told me, this is what this book told me, right? And we're taught to not trust our intuition. And
yes,
how many mothers like agonize over this and think that they
yes,
have to leave their baby there crying.
yes.
And so it's just a self-perpetuating machine,
It
really.
is. And I mean, I always go back to that animal example. Isn't it fascinating that all the bears in the world and all the wolves in the world, they don't have these manuals that are teaching them how to raise their young. They just do it intuitively.
Yeah.
And so we actually have that in us.
Hmm.
We have that in us, but we have so bleached it out of our somatic system, out of our psyche, out of our relational field with others. I mean, I can't count how many times I've had moms tell me by either email or in our courses, when their doctors said, put the little one into tummy time, which is where you put a pretty newborn infant on their stomach on the floor. And it's supposed to be to help them develop strength in their neck and their back. And it's just not accurate
Yeah.
because they're not ready to go on their front because they don't have the strength to pull the head up. And so often moms will say, yeah, I remember the first time I did that. One of two things happens. I remember doing that and the cries were too severe. I couldn't. And that was the only time I ever did it. And then others will say, oh my God, it was painful, but I did it anyways because that's what the doctor told me.
Yeah.
Even though they felt absolutely horrified for the scream, they overrode
Yeah.
that instinct.
Yeah.
And that shows how powerful that system can be.
Mhm.
Again, if you got a broken leg, if you have a lung infection, go to the doctor and get whatever you need. But in that instance, it's like, wait a second, why are we listening to, it's not even about men or women, it's just the doctor, saying to us to do this. So, that basic intuitive piece is there.
Yeah.
And it's a hard one. It's a hard cookie to crack.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, anyway,
well, through the work with you, and that's one thing that there's two things I definitely want to address. So,
yes.
one is that through this type of work, this nervous system regulation work,
Hmm.
your intuition will get stronger
Oh, yeah.
and you will learn to trust your intuition. Can you
Hmm.
speak to that for just a
Yeah.
second there? That's
Well,
a good one.
totally. If we think of that little, whether it's the tummy time baby or the cry it out baby or the 5-year-old toddler that fell, scraped their knee, and wasn't allowed to cry
Mhm.
and feel and be connected with in that pain, you
Mhm.
know, we start to shut down
Mhm.
not just things like crying, but when we shut that down, we stop feeling where the cries come from. If anybody's ever held back tears, they know the throat gets really burny and tight, or there's like a tension in the chest. Or if you're feeling uneasy about something, you might feel something in your belly, like I don't feel good in my tummy. So there's all these physical sensations that are inherently visceral. They're in our organs, they're in our tissues, but then we interpret them in our brain. And so part of the work and part of developing intuition is getting back into those organ spaces, getting back into, just, oh, this is me. And not in a way that's like, I love myself, which a lot of practices do. It's like, just, this is my skin.
Right.
Oh, wow. This is the joint of my finger, and as silly and as simple as it seems, like when the teaching and when the lessons are approached from a very intentional nervous system based field, doing something as simple as holding the joint of your wrist or the elbow or the knee is powerful, because we hold in these joints and in these spaces the affect, the emotion, the sensations that have been trapped. That example of me sitting at the beach and thinking I had like a blood clot running down my legs. I mean, that is basically my essence and the cellular structures coming alive again. It's like a pop can, that you're shaking up and it's just fizzing. And so when we start to wake up those somatic spaces, coupled with the cognitive knowing that this isn't something bad, this sensation, this is actually a good thing. Couple that with then being connected with the environment, which is a big part of the work. We are then, in a way, reverse engineering and remedying the insult, the damage that disconnected us from the viscera, from the tears, from around us. Because if we're being told by a mom or a dad, stop crying, or you're okay, or whatever, we're not trusting that environment anymore. We're not trusting people anymore. And so we become very alone, very insular, very introverted, and we stop trusting what we're feeling. So as we start to trust, as we start to connect to the organs, as we start to cognitively align with that, in addition to the environment, our intuition just starts to spark. And I'll also say, it's not something that's just foolproof. It isn't like, oh, one day you have it all and that, and the next you didn't. It's this slow process. I still, catch myself going, whoops, should have listened to that.
I still do that sometimes.
Of course. I mean, that's the thing, is it's not this binary situation where one day you have all this trauma and stress and then the next day it's gone. That's really important, because the medical community and the medical world has taught us, you have the infection, you take a course of antibiotics, then it's over. And that works in that paradigm. The broken leg thing, same thing. This is not like that. This work is more like, deciding to eat better consistently for the rest of your life. To start exercising and moving, and anyway, you get it. So
it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. By the time I made it to your program, I had been doing personal healing for probably 15 years. And I had done a lot of healing. And then since your program, I have done so much healing. And it's been really fascinating because I had trauma come up that I had completely suppressed, and I had stuff come up. And one of the beauties of it, I felt like after doing your program, was that it was a lot easier to roll with it. I was able to have the extreme grief and rage of the trauma that I was just remembering, right? And I was able to hold that in the same container with being okay. And my life being pretty good, I could be raging, screaming, crying in an intense healing process and then get up and make dinner.
totally.
you know?
That's a really good point because again, this paradigm of processing means you have to take like a week off. And sometimes, depending on the situation, you
Mhm.
might need to take a little extra time. And you had done so much work prior. So
Yeah.
your capacity was already pretty damn big.
Mhm.
And so everyone's going to be a little different. But it's true, like there is something quite liberating and empowering when we can see these things that come up not as things to dread and worry about, but what actually tends to happen when the Smart Body, Smart Mind students start commenting on our forum and sharing experiences is they'll get excited when a flashback comes in. They'll get excited when they have a physical breakdown and a rage comes out because they know that their system is not holding it anymore, which means that they've actually grown enough natural capacity for it to come out organically.
Mhm.
And that's a big difference. Like we don't, and you can attest to this, in the program, we're not saying, can you write down all the things that happened to you that were bad?
Yeah.
Like if a person wants to share
Mhm.
what occurred, that's 100% fine. But there is not one exercise
Right.
in that entire 12 weeks that says, I want you to document and do homework that hash, it's just, it doesn't have to occur in this format,
Right.
right? We're really reverse engineering that system to basically wake up again. I liken it to, when you think of a coloring book,
Mhm.
imagine like a picture you've only colored in with grays and whites.
Mhm.
And nothing wrong with grays and whites. They're beautiful colors, but part of this process is coloring back that picture with all the shades
Right.
of color across the rainbow
Yeah.
and giving it that life back. And then as you give it the life back, that's when those very unconscious,
Mhm.
stored survival stresses, they
Mhm.
literally are like, oh, like so and so, my owner, whatever you want to call it, they're doing the work so that I can safely come out.
Yeah.
And so it's a very personal process. It's not like, okay, everyone, we're going to do this today, and you're all going to scream for 2 minutes,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like happens in so many conferences where you all just have like a cathartic fest.
Mhm.
That's very, very different.
Yeah, it is because it's very natural. It is as the body allows it to release. And something
Uh-huh.
that I noticed too was that my definition of trauma broadened a lot in your program.
Yes.
So going into your program, I thought, okay, I was raped and that's really like that's my trauma,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
what I started to realize was that like injuries were trauma. I grew up as a soccer player and
Mm.
a gymnast and especially in gymnastics, I had a lot
Oh
of
gosh.
injuries and I never thought about it as being trauma at all. I have had experiences in life where people close to me died tragic deaths where I was there for them. And I thought, well, it didn't happen directly to me. So that's not trauma. And yet, as I was doing all this work, it
Hmm.
was all coming to the surface. And
Oh
that
yeah.
takes me to just sort of this energetic trauma, this whole, because
Yeah.
I know that so many of you who work with me and who are on my list are so sensitive and so empathic. And I
Hmm.
had never considered
Hmm.
empathic trauma until I started to realize that my nervous system had been in high alert for a long time without any physical violence around me,
Hmm.
but because of the repressed trauma of people around me. So I would love for you to speak to that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I see them all kind of as one big hologram, like,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that you mentioned what we would call vicarious trauma. So, being around people who have died or were in accidents, and it was just so hard to see that impacts us
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Um, the empathic piece and the energetic piece is so interesting because it's like you can't touch it and you can't name it,
Mhm.
but it's still going in to the cells.
Mhm.
And so we could say, and this is a newer topic for me, but we could say that, that requires a little more discernment, a little more I'm using my hands here, a little more kind of quality, ease and touch and gentleness. This ability to really sense the energy in conjunction with the somatic, like the body.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting is we forget, or at least I sometimes do, that we're physical, but the nervous system is electrical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the cells are electrical. Like if you understand biochemistry, for stuff to get across the cell membrane, there's like these electrical pumps that
Right.
like we have them all around our body. And so our nervous system is like a conduit to the universal energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it just is. And we have elements in our DNA that are also universal. This is something that I'm playing with a little bit more as I age and add more. So this ability to really understand that kind of, it's funny, I don't even, saying empathic trauma doesn't even resonate for me in a way, because it's just this, God, it's like feeling the source of all of our pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Right? We're all sharing it like if we think about that baby that I was talking about earlier, my God, like it took all my might to not go and run and grab that kid. And so I was like, I could feel it. Oh my God. If it was an animal that was hurting, I would go and get it and bring it to like the vet or the animal shelter. But I'm like, what do you do with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I stood there, I moved, I felt, I breathed into that injustice. Like to me, that's like super injustice right there. That little one is completely immature and unable to walk out and say, sorry, mom, I don't like this. Like they can't do it. And so in that moment, I'll just use my own personal example. I felt the anger. I felt myself come out of neutrality because I swung to, how dare you, like wake up.
Yeah.
I then had to remember she doesn't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I'm about to go home and talk to Janet. We're going to talk about this work. And that is what is going to make the difference. Right. So there's kind of this like, I can still feel it. It's like, but then you have to it's not about so much letting it go, but appreciate that everyone's at a different place.
Yeah.
And me ruining my day, getting angry and writing an Instagram post about, because that went through my mind. I'll be honest, like, oh, I need to do a live about how we should, and just like, no, that's not useful. It's being, it's dividing the situation. Does that make sense?
It does. And well, what you showed here was that you allowed your nervous system to go through a process of regulation with it, right?
Oh, I got activated. Like I got super activated. I didn't get dysregulated, but it activated me. It got me a little up, and I tracked. Right. That was the thing. I tracked what was happening, but then I had to use my higher brain to know, of course, she's doing that because she doesn't know.
Right.
She doesn't know, and that's fine. And there's a lot of people that don't know, but then there's a lot of people who want to know. And we're all on a path. It's just varying degrees of where we are.
Right. But until we learn that, so just thinking about sort of like my experience growing up, there was repressed trauma and repressed emotions in my household. And I didn't understand that. I was very sensitive. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand beneath the surface anger. I thought because beneath the surface it shouldn't be talked about, or so I felt there was something wrong when I felt it, or that it was my fault. And so I would have these reactions. I still, if somebody gets very angry close to me, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm able to do what you said, like, okay, I can work my way through this. But when I was, a wee lassie, I could not do that. And I think that it really had a profound impact on my functional freeze.
100%. And if you think about that example, and I mean, this is so common, like I couldn't show anger, or anger was so violent in the household that I was terrified of any time I felt
Mhm.
wanting to scream.
Yeah.
And again, if we really kind of step back and look at the macro of that, that's just kind of has been, correct myself, that has been the norm
Mhm.
in Western society, if we name it one thing. um, we haven't typically, we're not tribal the way I saw, say, my mother's from the Philippines. So people dance, they sing, they're moving. I've never been to Africa, but you see tribal, like there's a lot more movement of the body, expression, sounds, hitting of the drums, like doing things that we see and we think look absolutely crazy and even demented.
Mhm.
But and so that it's like they're doing something that's helping them process their day-to-day being, of being even a human on the tribal plains or in the jungle or wherever. And
Right.
then we've got us who are more structured, nuclear family, just like everything's so perfect, and don't fart, don't burp. You only sing on Sunday at church, but not at the dinner table. It's just
And not if
ridiculous.
you don't have good, not if you're not a good singer, like,
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
oh, and you can't dance. Like, well, that's not dancing. Dancing should look like this. It's like, no. And so if we think of that level of, I mean, the word social engineering has
Yeah.
been a hot topic for me this last little while. Conditioning, we don't realize how repressed we are
Yeah.
until we start to tune into these elemental somatic urges that are truly mammalian but are also human,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when we start to get that revved, it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of like, it's kind of cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
it's fascinating. Fascinating stuff. We have covered so
a
much
lot.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the one thing that you wanted to before we started recording was how this has helped your clients,
Yes, thank you for
right?
reminding
No
me,
problem.
because that is really important. Yes, so I not too long ago, Irene and I did a really fascinating interview
It
on
was great.
lives, and it's super fun. So
Yeah,
we'll check.
watch it.
Yeah. As a result of that, I ended up working with a lot of Irene's clients, people who had gone through her
Mhm,
Smart Body, Smart Mind program.
mhm,
And prior to that, I had some clients who had done it,
mhm.
but I had been kind of working with those clients over a long period of
Yeah.
time, so had been with their evolution, and so things weren't sparking in quite the same way. So
Mhm.
I had this influx of Irene's clients who had worked with her and who had completed that program. And it was fascinating to me, um, how different the healing sessions were. And I want to be
Yeah.
careful of not quantifying this as like good or bad or this or that.
Yeah.
Like everybody just is where they were,
Yep.
where they are. And also, I want to say that as a result of doing the nervous system rewiring, that there was a lot of resiliency even within the healing. Um,
Mhm.
the clients were much more open. They were
Mhm.
much more able to, in different types of sessions. I did remote healing sessions with them, and I did a type of healing session with some of them where it's kind of like a guided meditation where they connect to their higher self and we move around in their body and just go where the healing takes them. And
Yep.
we could, with your clients, we sometimes were in the body, sometimes we went to past lives, we went to parallel lives, we went, I mean,
Yeah.
all over
Oh,
the
yeah.
place, and we're really able everyone was really able to move and flow with the energy. And if emotions came up, they expressed the emotions, it
Yes.
rolled through them. They were very energetically agile
That's a
within
great word.
the within the healing itself,
Yes.
and also more intuitively connected. So in the remote healings where I'm just sort of here recording and they're just receiving and we're not, physically connected to
Yeah.
it, they would listen to the recording and there was a lot of, I saw the exact same thing. I felt that there was just a lot more connectivity, intuitive
Mhm.
connectivity to what was going on. And there were a lot of sparks to externals
Mm.
where they were doing something. Like one woman, we did a type of healing where we did some womb healing when she was in her mother's womb, and we were working
Uh,
on her egg, and it was amazing. Like the egg
wow.
that became her. And she told me that she talked to her mother around that time, and within a few days her mother had gone to a healer and done the same thing.
Wow.
I mean,
Without her knowing that she had done.
either of them knowing. And it's I feel like a lot of it has to do with being more aligned with, more connected to the synchronicities and the possibilities, and just a little more online. That's like a way of saying it, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, as I said a few moments ago, from what I'm learning as I dive deeper, the electrical nature of the nervous system and the elemental nature of it is connected to the universal, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
source, God, Akashic records, frequency, it doesn't matter, right? It's like Star Wars, it's the force, like the thing that binds us, right?
Absolutely.
And when a person has got better regulation at the somatic, like their own physical structure, 3D structure, if we want to call it that, when it is more aligned and there's more intuition, more flow, more acceptance of, well, that was weird, but let's just go with it.
Right.
It opens up a completely different portal,
Yeah.
if you will,
Hmm.
into these other potentials that I think happen to a lot of people, but they don't even know they're happening because they don't have a language to listen to it, because it is in the somatic system.
Right.
And so, like you said, it can tap into the past, it can tap into parallel, it can tap into future,
Hmm.
into people in your world that are part of you that aren't there. I mean, it's kind of endless in a really cool way.
It is. It's infinite in its possibility.
Hmm.
It really is. Yeah. And I would say too that the results from the sessions tend tended as well to be a little more profound
Hmm.
and to
Yeah,
integrate a little more deeply.
100%. It's the same. I mean, I have a similar thing that I've heard with my colleagues
Hmm.
who are my colleagues, so they're SEPs and all that. And then they have clients who have done Smart Body, Smart Mind in my courses. And then they have clients who haven't. And either is both is good,
Yeah.
but they will say time and time again when they're working with the person who has gone through the program and who has done the groundwork.
Mhm.
It's like learning how to fly. Like you got to do ground school first before you can
Right.
fly a plane.
Right.
You have to. And so the people that have done the groundwork, again, it's not that they're necessarily easier to work with, but there's more availability to go deeper, faster, and in less time.
Mhm.
So a lot of the sessions can be less, like it can be 30 minutes as opposed to an hour, because they don't have to get warmed up, so to speak.
Yes.
And you're not having to convince the person it's okay to get angry. It's
Mhm.
okay to let your body do what it wants to do. Like all that's been kind of taken care of.
Yeah.
And even for myself, when I go to an acupuncture session now, or if I get some body work, it just happens more can happen in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
It makes all those other things like a lot more efficient and, as you said, integrated, and it sticks.
Yes. Efficient and integrative that sticks. That's
Yeah,
exactly
there we
that's
go.
exactly it.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
yeah.
um yeah, it's been really profound. It's been really profound. And as we both mentioned, there's no right or wrong or good or bad.
Mm-mm.
It's just that and I would say, especially if you are somebody who feels like you've been stuck in your healing,
Mhm.
or if there's something that's not happening, or even if you just want to take your healing to a deeper level,
Yeah,
like
higher level.
that, working, doing your program. I mean, it really is life changing.
Mhm.
And so I just have such deep gratitude for the
Mm,
work that you're bringing into the world. I mean, personally, I've just benefited from it so much. And
yeah,
professionally, I've been able to see the benefits of it so
so good,
profoundly. Yeah.
so good. Yay, love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome.
Yes. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to share all of your
Yeah.
information with everybody. You have your video series coming up
Mhm.
that just opened my eyes like so much. Like,
Yeah,
holy crap! Oh my god, I have no more. Because even, I mean, that video series is,
it's
uh,
a lot.
yeah, it's like 3 15-minute videos.
It's
And
3 yeah, 3 videos that range from 30 minutes to, like, 15 minutes, I think. There's 3 of them.
okay, they're a little bit
Yeah,
long. But even in those 3 videos, like and that speaks to, I thought they were about 15 minutes. Like
yeah,
they
yeah.
were
They're
like,
they're quick.
they're quick, but and they are packed full of information. Like
Yeah.
I was like, I just learned so much.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. If you're watching this, get into those no matter what,
Mhm.
because as you said before at the beginning of our chat, just knowing the information
Yeah.
will start to, it's like the wheels start to turn. It's like you can't help but not when you start to understand the theory a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And
yes.
it's relaxing for the nervous system in and of itself. The nervous system is like, oh, she cares. She's
Yeah,
learning about me, right? Like the system
yeah.
starts to kind of drop in. And it's like what we were just speaking about. Like something that occurred to me is that part of why
Mhm.
it's more efficient is because your system's like, it's just more connected. It's like I can relax a lot faster, right? And it's almost like I feel like when I first started that, all of a sudden I had some permissions I didn't have before,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, the one thing that we hear often is, "Oh my God, I knew something like this was needing to be learned. I knew there was something, and this, you gave me that something that I've been looking for."
Yeah.
And we'll have people who are brand new to the healing world
Mhm.
say that. We'll have people who are in their 70s say
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Teachers, people who are chronically ill. I mean, it's just, and it's, again, it's information that we know exists. And so it's just been packaged in a way that's a little easier to get.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people have to spend, 20 years like I have trying to find all this information. I already did that, so don't do that work. Just watch the video.
Right. Totally. And yeah, I'll just end with the fact that the way you deliver information, you are a prolific educator. And it's just a joy to follow you anyway, because I learned so much. But it's very palatable and digestible,
Yeah,
right? You're talking a lot of science, but you're not using a lot of sciencey words, right? It's just very much, it's like getting a gourmet meal, but you get it and you know exactly what it is and what it looks like, and you're like, okay, I can eat that. It's like
uh-huh,
it goes in easily and it goes down easily and it digests easily.
100%. That's a good analogy. I like that.
Thank you, Irene. I really
You
appreciate
are
you taking
welcome.
the time to talk with us.
Yeah,
Take care. Bye.
bye.